prosperity in metropolitan Atlanta and beyond. Through our partners, we work to influence public policy as well as the values that influence public policy in a way that will create a more inclusive and just society. So we use various elements of our organization to advance a new agenda for equity, whether it be through our policy and advocacy work, our research, our leadership development, framing, and communications. But I think even more important with all of the formal tactics that we utilize as an organization, our most powerful tactic is our ability to create relationships between common and uncommon allies, creating safe spaces where people can come together and dream again and leave their titles outside and begin of doing the people's work, the work of creating a more just and inclusive society. We all have a part to play in undoing the legacies of structural racism. Being on the sidelines is not an answer anymore. We all have to be in the game. We need all people, regardless of your background, to see the value proposition in ensuring that all people have a chance to play a role and play a key part in ensuring that not only their communities will have a chance to reach their full potential, but that all communities could have or reach their full potential. In our most treasured writings in America, we talk about the pursuit of happiness. You can't pursue happiness if you can't get there.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Marjy TV. My name is Marjy Marj, and I am so happy to be here today. We are going to talk about equity in the Black community. It is such an honor to have Nathaniel Smith coming out of Georgia. He's going to be educating us, sharing some nuggets with us, and we are so fortunate to have Victor Durrah out of Spartanburg, South Carolina, facilitating this event. As you all know, it's Black History Month, and we get to celebrate and uplift each other. It is so important for us to put that positive energy out there, and it is so important to celebrate our legacy. And so at this time, I'm going to bring Victor in so that he could tell us a little bit about the conversation tonight. Let's go. Let's see if Victor is available.
Hey, Marjy Marj.
How are you?
I'm doing good. How about yourself? And happy Black History Month.
Yes, happy Black History Month to you too. So tell us about tonight's program. What's happening?
Oh man, we've got Nathaniel Smith from the Partnership for Southern Equity with us today. And we're going to talk all things equity. How equity, what is equity, how equity works, why it's important for the Black community to advocate for equity. And we're just happy to have Nathaniel. He's been doing some great work out in Georgia with equity and racial equity and their different programs and outreach initiatives to really promote and make change in the world of equity. And it's an opportune time. This is Black History Month. We know a lot of folks before us have fought for equity and equality. So to have that conversation in today, it just kind of commemorates all the things that our ancestors fought for.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. I know a lot of the times people get confused when it comes to equity versus equality. So it is really good that we're going to have Nathaniel talk to us tonight. And I'm sure you're going to share your perspective with everything that you do for Brothers Restoring Urban Hope. Thank you for your activism and for your commitment to your community.
Thank you. And we appreciate the partnership on tonight with Marjy Marj TV.
You are so welcome. Now, viewers, if you're here, let us know where you're watching from. You can always drop your questions in the chat room. these men are going to do a fabulous job tonight, I believe. And so we're going to sit back and listen to them. And before we get started, let's get a little intro to tonight.
What's going on, brother? You doing all right?
I'm doing excellent now. I tell
Good.
you, it's truly a pleasure to have an opportunity to spend some time with you and Marjy.
Absolutely, man. Happy Black History Month, man. And we're glad that you can be here with us today in Spartanburg, South Carolina. Well, really across the world because we're virtual, but by way of Spartanburg, South Carolina. And we're happy to have you today, man. And if you would just tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, and how did you get into this work of equity? And then the other piece of it is, let's kind of explain to people what is the work of equity.
So I am a native Southerner, a native Atlantan. I'm a third generation Atlantan. My parents, I had the honor of having parents that were actively involved in the civil rights movement. And so I had a chance early on to be exposed to the work that needed to be done in order to advance justice in America through the civil rights movement of the American South. And from growing up in that experience, it just really compelled me and inspired me to honor my ancestors by fighting for justice and for loving future generations by continuing to run this race. And I had an opportunity to do that as a young staffer at the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. And then I had a chance to also work for an organization called the Atlanta Neighborhood Development Partnership, which did a lot of great work around housing affordability issues. I left there and went to Emory University in Atlanta. And then after that, I founded the Partnership for Southern Equity, which is now focused on advancing racial equity in the South. And Yep. And to answer your question, so for me, equity is really about harmony, really, more than anything. It's about creating the conditions where all people can contribute and prosper in our society. And unfortunately, everybody is not starting at the same place. That is why equality is not sufficient, a sufficient ask for Black people, because we need more than an equal amount. We need the right amount. And the equity agenda allows us to not only push for that amount, but to also work to advance policies and practices that create the outcomes that we need for our communities.
So you talk about the Partnership for Southern Equity and the work that you all do. What does that look like? What does the work on behalf of equity for Black communities look like?
Well, first, it starts from a place of humility. Understanding that we don't have all the answers. It starts with believing that the people that are closest to the problem are actually closest to the solution. It also starts with understanding that the people have to be put at the center of the work that we do. And even more so, that we have to begin the process of creating these relationships and these power dynamics in our communities that will generate the type of outcomes that we need for our community. Equity also means that we understand, as James Baldwin said, that history is the present, that the decisions that were made in the past, in particular in the American South, around chattel slavery, Jim Crow, Reconstruction, all of the various unfortunate policies that were undergirded by white supremacy continue to hurt us to this day. And so if we are to move forward to create a more inclusive and just society, we have to begin to fight and undo the original sin of America. And that is the sin of stolen land and stolen labor. And if we don't do that, then we'll never be able to truly realize what America can be, not only for its people, but also for the world.
Those flawed systems that you speak of, they bleed into different areas, areas that affect us as African Americans for upward mobility and economic stability, right? Talk about the infrastructure of opportunity and the residential segregation, social capital, family structure, and public policies, and the fact that all of those things affect us as African Americans across the board, because it's not just one specific thing, right? It affects a whole lot of different areas.
Right. Well, one of the ways that I would like to start, because there was a lot that you packed into that question,
Yeah,
right?
right, right.
So let's start with the truth that public policy is a reflection of the values of people in power, right? So I'm going to say that again.
Right.
Public policy is the reflection of the values of people in power, which means that when we look at communities of limited opportunity, when we look at communities that have been redlined, communities where it's easier to buy a hand grenade than a head of lettuce, you know, when we look at the challenges that we face in the Black community, that has just as much to do with the values and the perceptions that white people have of us than what we can actually do for ourselves, because they are the ones that are influencing public policy. So it's easy for them, if they consider us not valuable, to say that we're going to encourage banks to not invest in Black communities because of the risk associated with it, which is basically what redlining was, which minimized opportunities for economic opportunity and growth to occur in our communities.
Right.
Or it could easily be, you know, this Black neighborhood isn't that important, so we're going to build a highway on top of it, right? In order to ensure that the communities that we value will have a chance to get to work. And we saw that through the realization of the Eisenhower Highway Act, where many highways were built on top of Black communities, right? We also can see it when governmental agencies work with energy companies and decide to put toxic plants, or other environmentally unsafe companies decide to put toxic buildings and plants next to Black communities. You know, we have to ask ourselves, if they really value the Black community, would they put those toxic plants next to us? So again, policy in essence is a reflection of the values of people in power. And so that is why at the end of the day, we need a values revolution in America. And that values revolution has to center the humanity and values of not only the Black community, but all communities, all individuals who believe that justice is the answer and not exploitation and racism and extraction. That is what this work is all about.
Do you feel like this value system that you're speaking of, do you think that it kind of speaks towards the thought of a beloved community in a sense, and the values that
you mean our values as you, my brother, and me?
Right.
You know, I would say that you know, the work of the beloved community is definitely a dream. You know, it is a dream where everyone, or a goal or a value proposition that is definitely better than what we have right now. And I would say that a lot of times I've had conversations with people that have looked at the idea of the beloved community as something that is unattainable. And I have to remind them that, well, there was a dream to create the society that we're in today. And there were policies and systems that were put in place to reinforce someone else's dream. So why won't we work with our partners to organize our way into the dreams that we want for our community? And so, I believe that that is a defeatist attitude, and we can't stop, because if we stop dreaming, then we're minimizing our ability to make the transformational change that we need in the community. And that's really what Dr. King was doing when he said, I have a dream. He didn't say I have a 10-point plan, right? He didn't say I have a novel,
Right.
He didn't say I have these graphs or these pie charts. He knew that the most powerful thing in the world is an idea and a dream. And moving on that is really a great opportunity for us to continue to do what he talked about with other great leaders like Fannie Lou Hamer and Ella Baker. It wasn't the data or the facts that kept Ella Baker going, or Fannie Lou Hamer. It was a dream that one day that their children or loved ones who were younger than them would not have to go out and pick cotton.
Right.
And so, how would they know that they would come? They didn't, but they didn't stop. They didn't stop.
Right. And I think it's good that you mentioned that equity is something that the whole community should and could embrace. But when you speak about policies that are written to fulfill another man's dream,
Mm-hmm.
and not necessarily the Black man's dream, I'm not asking you to give me a plea per se, but what would you say to someone on the other side of the fence on why they should work on equity when it doesn't speak to their dream or their financial situation or their power? Does that make sense?
Well, I would concur, though. I mean, not concur. I would actually push back on that, in that, there was another thing that Dr. King talked about, and it was the network of mutuality, that we're all tied by this single garment of destiny. What affects one directly affects us all indirectly. And so we share a destiny as a human species, and a culture of exploitation and extraction will not last long, right? And it's not just about doing it for the right reasons, but even if you looked at it from a pragmatic perspective, for the businesses that are out there that need talent in order to stay competitive, how can you find that talent if all of the kids around you are eventually going to be majority children of color, and none of them have graduated from high school because you locked all of them up? Where's the talent going to come from? So how can your business remain competitive in a global economy with one human resource arm tied behind your back because you haven't worked to ensure that all people were trained and in a position to be a part of your regional or statewide workforce, right? Or what does it mean to live in a community of opulence when you have to live in a gated community because all of the people outside of that gate don't have adequate food, jobs, or resources? If they can't get it the right way, they're going to come for you, right? So there are a lot of different reasons why it is important for us to ensure that everyone has a chance to prosper. Because even from an international perspective, what happens when a dream is deferred, right? You look at from the perspective of the terrorists in other countries where they're willing to blow themselves up, right? Because they basically are dreams deferred. And so we have to do what we can to ensure that we not only maintain a level of equity in our communities, not only for the people that are being left behind, but for all of us, and even more so, in order to maintain our participatory democracy, right? That actually, by allowing our most vulnerable to be exploited, we're actually minimizing our ability to create an environment where America is truly the land of opportunity. More and more poor children are having an even more difficult chance to rise out of poverty, in particular in the South. In Atlanta, a poor child only has a 4% chance to rise out of poverty.
It's the same here in Spartanburg.
Right. That means that they have a 96% chance of staying poor if they were born poor. We cannot be comfortable with that type of statistic, and even more so in a place like Atlanta that is considered the quote unquote black mecca of the country, right? So again, it's not just about doing the right thing, which is what compelled me to start PSC. But if we want to preserve and grow our society, we cannot do that by continuing to leave more and more and more and more people behind.
That's good. That's really good. And to some folks that might be new to this work of racial equity, what are some of the areas that, and I know we talked about them behind the scenes, but there are some areas that you all focus on.
Yes.
What are you all doing at PSC to really change that view and really work towards racial equity?
Well, the first thing I want to do, brother, is make sure that people are very clear about what racial equity is.
Okay.
You know, so when we talk about equity, you know, the definition for equity for the Partnership of Southern Equity is just and fair inclusion. It's about creating conditions where all people can prosper in a society, right?
Right.
We talk about racial equity. We're talking about realizing a time where the color of someone's skin does not dictate the opportunities that they have to reach their full potential, right? So racial equity is removing race as a factor and racism as a factor in someone's success, right? So,
you know, before you move to that next part, this is something you always say, and I watch a lot of your videos and a lot of your conferences. You say you have to know what equity is, but you also have to know what equity is not.
That's right.
Can you speak towards that?
That's right. So I think a lot of times we work. So it's a hard, right? Because, you know, we've been conditioned a lot of times to focus so much on the no, right? That, you know, we don't want this, we don't want that, we don't want this, that we haven't really been sophisticated enough to really be able to fully articulate what the yes is, right? But on the other side of it, if we're so caught up in what the yes is that we're not able to clearly articulate what we don't want, then we're actually in a similar situation, right? So for me, it's about, if we're not able to be able to clearly speak on what we want in this world to realize itself, then how can we expect for people to truly understand what we want? But in the same way, if we're not able to able to clearly articulate what we don't want, then how do we expect for them to respect us too? Because no is not enough. We have to be able to clearly articulate what we don't want, not just no.
That's good. That's good. That's good. Fakequity.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Fakequity.
That's another thing that I talk a lot about.
But we see that a lot when folks jump out to do a check box, right?
That's right.
How is that harming the work of true equity for Black communities?
Well, I mean, we've seen it. I mean, if we're talking about a Black agenda, I mean, for equity, you know, then we've seen it in the Black experience way before equity came along, you know, whether it be our music, whether it be our culture, whether it be other key things that we brought, our inventions, in many ways, and in some cases, our religion that has been co-opted by other segments of the community. Well, equity is now in a place where the pain that created an agenda, a movement, is now being commoditized in a way that is benefiting certain segments of the community, in particular what I call the nonprofit industrial complex, that is primarily led by white executive directors who are supposedly working on the behalf of Black people and communities of color. But they're basically using our pain as a strategy to accumulate profit and grants. Or you have other institutions in positions of power that have taken our language, very similar to certain communities that have taken our music, to articulate and support their nefarious agendas that are so far from equity that if you look at it closely, they're not really about equity. Again, they're about self-preservation. So when I talk about fakequity, I'm talking about these reports that people write that are not about equity, but just have equity on the front of the report, or
Wow.
a report that has all of these, plans, but no real way to measure whether these plans are realistic. When I talk about fakequity, I'm talking about all of these murals of Black people in these communities when Black people are being pushed out at the same time. Fakequity is something that is real, and as Black people, we have to do all we can to fight against it.
Man, that's good. And I didn't want to cut you off because you were going to explain to us the different pieces that you all work on.
Yes.
But to your point, you said first let's talk about what equity is. So we were able to do that, right? So now I'd just like to hear, what does that work look like, or how are you all attacking it?
Yeah. So again, as I said before, the Partnership for Southern Equity is a racial equity organization. We are working to advance racial equity. And the 4 areas that we work in: climate, economy, or energy and climate, economy, growth, and health, are the avenues by which we're working to advance racial equity. So we're not doing these 4 areas and, oh, by the way, we want racial equity. We're a racial equity organization that is working to advance racial equity in those 4 areas. And it's important for me to articulate that, because there are a lot of organizations that now all of a sudden saying that they care and they're doing racial equity, but they're not centered in racial equity the way that we are as an organization, right? So it's important for me to say that. Two, so for example, when you look at the work that we do in our Just Opportunity space, which is the work that we're doing around economic inclusion, through the support of foundations like the Rockefeller Foundation, we are working to create an effort called Just Capital, where we're working with micro and Black-owned businesses to organize them for them in ways that will allow them to be more effective on the civic front. So there are a lot of conversations about capital, and we can try to support them with that, but we also are working to organize them in a way where they can speak out for public policy change in ways that will benefit micro and Black businesses. We're also working to engage around public finance, because a lot of times people don't understand that our tax dollars are sometimes used to benefit corporations at the expense of the taxpayer. So as opposed to it being used to build affordable housing, it's being used to build stadiums. And so, through our democratizing development work, we're working to really elevate that reality and begin to organize the community around ensuring that their public dollars are being used for public gain, and that they're getting an adequate return on their investment. In the health space, we're working with one of our dearest foundation friends, the Healthcare Georgia Foundation, to advance an effort called the Two Georgias Initiative, where we're working in the 11 poorest counties in the state of Georgia, helping coalitions organize around a health equity agenda, and to help them think through ways that they can move forward. In our work around equitable growth, we're working with the city of East Point to develop the first equitable equity and strategic plan of any city in the state of Georgia, where the city council and the mayor and staff are working with us to develop an equity agenda for the city of East Point. So that there are many, many things. And of course, with our work around energy and climate, we initiated an effort called We the Plug, though, where we worked on the ground to organize Black communities around our public service commission race and work to educate the Black community around the power of the public service commission and why it's important for Black people to speak up with and against our utility companies and the challenges that our communities are facing around what we call the energy burden, where people are paying a high percentage of their energy costs on energy. And that's really affecting the Black community, in particular Black communities in the South.
You know, this sounds like it's pretty extensive work. For a community or a community organization or a community organizer, what are some nuggets that you would give to them? What kind of education do they need to have? What kind of background, what kind of experiences or different types of trainings might be out there for folks who really want to make a real impact on racial equity? Well, because I think folks just come out and say, hey, we want to work on behalf of racial equity with no real background in that. Do you feel like the background is important?
Oh, it's critical. I mean, you know, I really appreciate our celebrities and other people who believe that because of their influence, they can make a difference. But when you have someone like me and others who have spent almost 40 years of their lives fighting for and learning and going to school, you know, I think that we have to make sure that we, you know, understand that there is a segment of our population that has given their lives for our communities, and we need to leverage their experiences. Without doing that, we're setting ourselves up for failure. There was a reason why, after Donald Trump won, that he invited all the Black celebrities to his building and not people who were intellectuals and strong in terms of understanding what were the real policies that were required. He actually underestimated the Black community, and he made an informal statement by doing that. And basically his belief was that the celebrities were respected more in our community than the people who have sacrificed to make our community stronger, right? So again, you know, he didn't even invite the business leaders of the Black community. Right. So again, you know, I think that it's important for you to read. You know, I mean, I'm a voracious student of history. It's important for you to know where you're from and how we got to where we are. That's so there are several books that I would definitely encourage you to read in order for you to understand the history of oppression in our communities. I think it's also very, very important for you to be with the people who you want to serve. You know, it's very hard to do that from a distance. You've got to create opportunities for you to be with the people if you want to serve the people. And also, you know, I would encourage you to really jump in and really listen, right, to the elders and people who have come before us.
That's good.
People who had less resources than we have today, but they were entrepreneurial in the way that they move the work forward. So I think it's very, very important. And also, you know, don't be afraid to reach outside of your comfort zone. You know, the role of an organizer is not to have all the answers, but first to listen, to understand, and not to respond. I mean, the best organizers are the ones that actually make the people that they're organizing feel as if they came up with the ideas and the solutions, and not the organizer. Right. So it's really important to have all of those things, and even more important, to understand the trauma that you have experienced in your life and work hard to undo them, because hurt people. And we have to be healers in our communities and not takers. And a lot of times, because we haven't dealt with our stuff, when we're going out into the community and engaging, we're actually bringing our stuff to the work. Wow. And so at the end of the day, if you really want to talk about a revolution, the revolution has to first start inside. before it can actually translate itself outside.
That's good. You got to be with the people to serve the people. You got to be with them. Um, a lot of times I'm at different conferences and I've heard different speakers talk about the work of racial equity and equity, but no one can articulate what a win looks like. Can you talk about us? Can you talk to us from your experiences? You've been experienced over, for a long time.
Right.
What do wins look like for not only your organization but for your community?
Yeah. So the big win, right, for me is when, like I said, the color or pigment of someone's skin does not dictate the outcomes that they have in their lives. I say in some of my speeches that the color of skin should not take precedent or be more dominant on a child's life than the dreams that they have in their hearts. When we get to that point, that is the ultimate, in my opinion, win. But there are also real tangible wins as well. So, for example, the work that we were able to do in the county, in that Metro Atlanta called Clayton County, where we were able to work with the faith community and the elected officials and broader community to expand our public transportation system into Clayton County. And at that time, they did not have a transportation system. They were challenged. And it was the first time that the transportation system expanded in Atlanta in 40 years. Again, creating economic development opportunities in Clayton County and more mobility options for our working families. Success also means some of the work that we're doing with the city of Atlanta around the creation of a $13 million infrastructure bond, where the dollars will be used to expand parks in Atlanta, and at the same time, making sure that there's a local hiring strategy attached to that, where the people who live in those communities have a chance to have jobs that will pay a livable wage and assist them in benefiting from, again, this bond. Change can also be with us about some of the work that we're doing right now in the Atlanta University Center, which is the largest consortium of Black colleges in the country, where we're creating a resilience hub with a national organization called Groundswell, where we're creating a microgrid where the center will have access to solar energy, while at the same time, the people in the communities around our people will hopefully have access to energy through battery technology. And on top of that, be trained for the clean energy economy, so Black people can get green jobs and not get left behind. So there are real solutions now. Like this isn't just play talk, but the key is that we've got to be willing to train our minds in order to understand what the yes and the no is, and at the same time be courageous enough to put our lives on the line for our people. And because this type of work, I've been blessed to be on the cover of magazines and be this and that and this and on this list and that list. But they could take that all back if it meant that my people were free. None of that matters to me.
That's good. You talked about the greenery piece of your work, and you all are doing some. I guess you all are doing some series. It's a greenery series. Can you talk a little bit towards that? And
yes,
how forward thinking is that?
Yes,
that's forward thinking.
Yes, the Green Versation series, where one of our legends, really, who actually has opportunity, who I've had opportunity to learn from, and she also works for PSC, Dr. Harriet McLean from the Harambe Center in Savannah, is having a series this month for Black History Month, where they are inviting key leaders in the Black community that are doing work around sustainability to talk about things like green building, and things like sustainability and other key aspects of the sustainability conversation. There are a lot of Black folks now that are moving towards this conversation. You know, I always remind my white brothers and sisters that Black people were the first environmentalists, you know, because we were the first people. So again, you know, there's nothing that a white person can teach us about being an environmentalist because we worked this land for 400 years for free. But now we have to begin to go back to our roots and go back to the earth and form a coalition with the earth in a way that will create a more healing world, a more regenerative world. And the key to that is really understanding our role in it. Right. As not just people, but as Black people, people of African descent, right? Right. And that gives us even more of a responsibility because we were the first people, right?
Right.
The first people to ever set foot with our bare feet on the earth. So we have a responsibility to protect the earth and even more so do what we can to make sure that our people get reconnected with the earth.
There are some questions coming in.
I hope I can answer.
Okay, I know I'm looking. Well, these are actual comments, so okay, I take that back. So I was looking. I was like, okay, that doesn't seem like a question, but there's a lot of stuff on here. So let me go through it. Okay, so these are all comments, but folks, if we do have any questions, you can put those in the comment section for sure, and we'll try to get those answered in the next 5 minutes. But talk to our folks about how they can get involved with the work that you're doing. How can they find you? What can they do to assist? If we have folks that are in the Georgia area watching or surrounding areas, how can they get involved with the work that you all are doing?
Wow. So I would encourage you to definitely go to our website. And that's www.psequity.org. And you can learn about the various areas that we're engaged in. Also, if you are, represent an organization, of course, if you're interested in any of the 4 areas that we're engaged in, you can become a part of one of our equity circles. We also have an extensive leadership development program. So if you're interested in climate issues, we have a Just Energy Academy that is a region-wide leadership program. If you live in the Metro Atlanta region, we have the Regional Leaders for Equity program. We also have a youth summer camp. We also train people about organizing. We have our own style of organizing called value-based organizing. Right. So you can learn and be trained. And the cool thing about Zoom is now we're everywhere. It used to be a time where we used to have to constrict ourselves by who could come see us face to face. But now, I would definitely encourage you to try to, if you live outside of Georgia, to just reach out to us and see if there's an opportunity for us to, engage with you and support you, and we love to hear from you.
I got one more question. With the change of administration for the United States of America, do you feel like the work of racial equity with the change in administration, especially with a lot of the things that are happening in Georgia, congratulations, by the way, on the work that you all have done out there to get people in place. A lot of different folks. I don't even want to miss any names.
There's so many. Yeah, and most of them are Black women. So
absolutely,
much love to all of the Black women. I will begin with the first one. I mean, there are other ones that came after her, but Helen Butler is one in particular that I will lift up, who started with Joseph Lowry, the People's Agenda, the Georgia Coalition for the People's Agenda. She was registering Black folks to vote way before it was cool to do it. And so I always like to acknowledge our ancestors and the people that came before the superstars, before
Right.
me, before the Stacey Abrams and other people. And Helen Butler is definitely one of them.
So with the change in administration, how is that going to help you all's work? And how important was that to get the right people in place when you're talking about policy change and you're talking about advocating on behalf of racial equity? How important is that?
I mean, I cannot communicate how huge it is for that transition to occur because, and again, this is not about a Democrat or a Republican.
Right.
You know, people always ask me who my candidate is equity. You know, and that's really what we did with our Vote for Equity campaign around the Senate race and also the Public Service Commission race in Georgia. Like equity, it doesn't matter whether you have an R beside your name or D beside your name. If your candidate is equity, then you have a better chance at being my candidate. So it's not about a D or R, but what I will say is, you know, the Biden administration has passed an executive order around racial equity. The Biden administration is also initiating a Just 40 initiative where he's pushing for 40% of all of the contracts and job opportunities to go into communities of color. There are some major, you know, the climate space in terms of, you know, the EPA and the Department of Energy really thinking through ways to ensure that equity can realize itself. You know, opportunity to revisit the Community Reinvestment Act. I mean, these are all things. I mean, so the thing that used to frustrate me the most is when I would sit in the barbershops with my brothers and someone would say, I'm not voting because my vote doesn't make a difference. You know, Negro, don't you know that if it wasn't for black folks in South Carolina, Joe Biden would not have been the Democratic nominee for president of the United States? Don't you know that if it wasn't for black voters, that Jon Ossoff and Raphael Warnock would not be senators in the United States Senate? Don't you know if it wasn't for black folks in places like Philadelphia, you know, that Biden would not have been in a position to win Pennsylvania? Or if it wasn't for indigenous Americans in Arizona, that Biden would not have been able to win Arizona or New Mexico? So again, like this BS about our vote doesn't count. I hope that this completely silences that argument forever. You know,
I agree.
Because, you know, Joe Biden is just as much a black candidate, not a black person. I'm saying a black candidate, a person that was put in office by black people, than Keisha Lance Bottoms, who's the mayor of Atlanta. Like there's no ifs, ands, or buts about that for me. And all you have to do is look at the numbers. In Georgia, only 31% of white women voted for Jon Ossoff and Raphael Warnock. 31%. So how did white men didn't vote for him? So how did they win? It was black people and other people of color that did it. And also our white brothers and sisters who saw the light and understood that the burden of white supremacy is too heavy to bear. You know, so I want to definitely show them love too and thank them for their commitment to the struggle as well.
Man, you've gave us so many jewels on tonight. The work you're doing is very important. And I just want to commend you for your courage, your strength to really speak it from the heart. I've been to a lot of different meetings. I've been to a lot of different conferences, and we try to sugarcoat things. We try to be politically correct with it. But I will tell you, following your videos, following your conferences, following the work that you all do, I had to have you on for Black History Month because you speak from the heart. You speak from passion. You speak for the people. It's one thing to try and convince somebody to to agree with you, and it's another thing when you're already convicted, so it doesn't matter whether they agree or not.
Right.
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 Those two conversations come off differently. So I commend you.
Thank you,
and
brother.
we'll be praying for you, brother, in your fight.
Thank you.
And
I appreciate that.
continue being that light for us, for real. And I've sent the message over to your folks. I really want to get you down for a some type of conference or talk or whatever.
Let me know. I mean, yeah, let me know. One of my dearest friends is actually, I don't know if you know Anton Gunn in South Carolina, but he had an opportunity to run President Obama's campaign in South Carolina, and he's in Austin. But he's a great asset to South Carolina, great friend, and also have other, in Winston-Salem, of course, one of our closest funders, the Mary Reynolds Babcock Foundation, is there. And so, I'll be more than happy to come and do whatever I can to support you all. And like I said before, the work of the Partnership for Southern Equity is not just for Georgia, even though that is where we're based. It is for the South, because the future of the nation depends on what we do down here, whether they want to acknowledge it or not. So wherever the fight is, and wherever there's an opportunity for me to be helpful, that's where I'll be. So don't hesitate to reach out if we can be helpful.
Before we get out of here, share your taglines, your Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter sites with the folks again. And if we don't have any questions from the group, which doesn't look like we do, we'll conclude. But share with the folks how we can get in touch with you.
Yeah, I hope I didn't bore anybody, but
oh no, you good. You got 50 comments on here, bro.
You can go to PS Equity Matters. That's our Twitter, I believe. Of course, Partnership for Southern Equity for Facebook, PSC TV for YouTube. Definitely want to make sure that we get this show, Marjy, if we can make sure that this show is on PSC TV as well, so we can make sure that we spread the word about this great vehicle. And I can't remember what our Instagram is, but just type in Partnership for Southern Equity. I wish my communications person was on the line. He could say all that stuff. I just try to do the work. I don't, and then just go to psequity.org. And, we love to hear from you.
Well, thank you again, and happy Black History Month, and keep doing the work of the people, my brother.
Yep, and congratulations again for your honor, and keep shining, man. Keep shining and keep up the good work.
I appreciate it, brother.
All right.
All right.
Take care.